So that's saying, hey, I want to use handlebars, and then I need to tell it where to find my handlebars files. I believe that's views, and then path. Dot join dir name and views. Cool. So this is saying, like, if I have a folder named views and I have handlebars files in there, I should be able to render those templates inside of routes. So if I do something like app.get that and request response and do response.render a template named index. Should be starting to get in the neighborhood a little bit. So how about I make a folder called views. I'm going to touch a layout file in there that's going to kind of wrap all this. And then an index file that's the actual thing that I'm trying to render. So this is just regular old HTML at this point. You can do doc type HTML, some dopey ass boilerplate. So we'll sanity check ourselves by making sure we can get something on the page. And let's give it a title. And called it message box. All right, so first thing, let's see if we can start the server now. Oh, wait a minute, there's no script. Let's hop over here. We'll add a start script. Say that's how we want to start this. And you can also, while we're at it, add one for testing. Yeah, so you're installing it with Node, and npx is a way that you can do an executable like Cypress that you install via Node. Oh, really? That's nice. Cool. So address is in use 3000. Okay. Tell you what. Fuck that. I'm just going to do it this way. I don't think anybody's using 4000 right now. All right, so I got something listening. If I hop over to my tests, I had that test that I wrote. Let's use our new script. Yeah, call. That would be a terrifying dog. If I heard that sound come out of a dog. Hey, cool, I got a passing test now. So what this is, I always write my first tests kind of like this, where it's something that's basically testing nothing, but keep in mind, before this, I didn't even have an app, and now I have something. So now I can start to test for more meaningful things. So my next one might be something like, hey, I want you to, hey, what's up, Saunders? I might want to get something called message input, and then type into it something like Kyle. And then I might want to get the message submit thing and click on it. And then I might want to get the message and assert something on it, like should have text Kyle. So now I have like a regular old acceptance test which does the things we're talking about. Find this, type something into it, click this button, verify that the thing shows up there. That's what we want this feature to do. So let's watch it fail. Cool, failed. So, what'd you say? Looking for an element message input, but never found it. So we can start working through those failures. And if I say, all right, so I was rendering the index. I'll call this body, which will make index render inside of this. And I might say, hey, I want to have a form. And it has an input that we'll call message input. And it's a text box. And while I'm at it, okay, I also want one that's submit. And cool. So now if I run it, it's still going to fail out. I haven't written any functionality to it, but it should at least be able to find those things that I made. Except maybe the message. Okay. What'd you say? Message submit is what I have to call this guy. It's when you get into a flow on this, what's kind of cool about it is like the errors will tell you everything that you need to do. You know that like feeling you get when you're making software and you go, oh, why isn't this fucking working? And then like an hour later, like, yes, it works, I'm a wizard. TDD is really about like narrowing those two things down. You don't stay frustrated for as long and the wins aren't quite as dramatic. So you're just trying to like work in very small predictable steps. All right, what's my error now? Hey, expected message to be Kyle, but the text was nothing. All right, so now we're starting to get into the behavior of this. And I think that this is the step where people get the most fucked up on TDD. Because TDD is supposed to be quick feedback loops. And like writing the functionality to like listen for this form submission and do all this shit, like that's going to take a while. It's going to be a while before I can go from red to green. So what I'll do a lot here is do what's called double loop testing or outside in testing. And how this works is if I have this outer loop, which is like the red-green refactor cycle for what I call acceptance. Dan was calling it integration yesterday. As he mentioned, controversial naming conventions for these things. So this is the feature that I'm trying to build. I can actually break this into smaller loops. And I would call these integration. You could argue that they're like kind of bigger unit tests. But all of the little pieces you need, like something that listens for a form submit and displays something on a page, I can build that out separately from my app and kind of test that independently. So that's what we're going to do. So what I want to do now is I'm going to install regular old Mocha and this cool tool called JS DOM. And Mocha, by default, expects a test folder. And I'm going to make a file called dom.js. So I need assert. I actually don't like chai very much. Most testing people really do. But Node has a built-in module called assert that gives me everything that I want. And then I actually never remember how to do this part correctly. So what I do is I look at another project where I did do it correctly and just copy and paste it. It's a completely legitimate way to do. Yeah, just steal from yourself. So this is how I set up JS DOM pretty much every time. I pull it in, and like the problem is that I'm going to want to do a like Node style test on something. The problem is that in Node there is no document, there is no window. Those are browser ideas, and so I'm adding a document and a window and using JS DOM to essentially make a fake DOM for me. And there's one other little utility that I like called setHTMLBody that will let me pass an HTML string into this, and it will just kind of make that available as a fake DOM. No, we need a fake DOM because I want to test that any form, any input that I have here that I submit via a form, I can make show up somewhere. That's a DOM idea on a DOM idea on a DOM idea. Form submission, catching a submission, reading an element and putting it in another element, that's all DOM stuff. Node has no concept of that. But Mocha testing something that isn't in Node sucks ass. So we want to try to do as much of this in Node as possible because we have these awesome testing tools. Yes. So we are in this double loop. This is Cypress. This is Mocha. Yes. So what I'm showing you is like TDD. TDD is test first. You might notice I haven't even looked at the site yet. This is all being driven by the tests. When you're taking existing code and verifying that it works the way that you want, that's a valid thing too, but that's test last, not test driving. And it's actually a lot easier to do in a lot of ways, because you can say like, all right, I think that when I sign up for an account, I should show up as a logged in user or something like that. You can just verify that. When you're trying to use it to drive the design of your application, it's much more difficult, but can save you a lot of time if you develop some muscles around this. All right, so I want to say something like, it should show a message from a form. Yes, as you'll see. So, all right, it shows a message from a form. So I want to pull in some JavaScript code. So I might call it app and require in something like scripts index.js. Now that file doesn't exist, so we need to make it. Scripts index.js. All right, so now that exists, and I'm saying, hey, when on this app, first of all, if I set an HTML body to some string, and last time I did this, good question I got was, why are we replicating this? Didn't we already do this in a template somewhere? And the reason is that thing I wrote in the handlebars files, that was specific to my app. I'm writing a function that would work on any app. And so you can imagine how this might be some super narrow part, like a component, like a React component level of complexity versus your entire app. That's why we're trying to test this all out separately. So if I say, okay, message input, and then I had a message submit that was of type submit. Okay, so this is, as far as the app knows, all that exists, or as far as the test knows, everything that exists in my DOM. So if that's the case, then I should be able to do something like document.querySelector and get that message input, and I should be able to set its text content, or sorry, its value equal to Kyle, and then I should be able to take this message submit and click on it, and I should be able to assert equal that document query selector message text content is Kyle. That makes sense, right? So it's a little bit more granular than how we handled it in the Cypress test, but I'm essentially saying if my DOM is this, and I set the message input to this, and then I click on that button, message should equal that. There's one other thing I have to do. I have to say, hey, app, attach form handler or something like that. So now if I do this, oh, so much faster. Whew, didn't have to have that 7 seconds of boot up. But it's saying, hey, you have this file, but that's not a function in it. Okay, let's make it a function in it. So if I go, if I go over to this and I say module.export equals that, and I called it attach form handler, and I make a function called attach form handler. All right, how you like me now, dummy? All right, cool, now we're getting somewhere. So my test fails, which would make sense because we haven't actually done anything yet. But I could start actually working with this now. And so I might say, all right, the way that this works is it takes, form handler takes a form and then says, all right, on submit, I want you to do something. And that something will be give me some form data. Oh, I got in trouble last time I did this. I think I might have just looked it up last time I did this. And this is part of the trickiness of doing this. Form data is a specific thing to browsers. So Node doesn't know what that is, so it's going to throw an error if I don't put window in front of it. If I do event.target, or Dan said, I could do $.form. They're the same thing. So all right, so that's my form data. and I want to document.querySelector for message and set its text content equal to form data dot get. I think I have to give it a name. Message. So I'll say, hey, get what the form data message. Also, thing I need to do is prevent default. All right, so get that message and make it the content of the message buddy. Let's see what happens. Cannot read add event listener of undefined. Probably because I didn't use it. So I need to say form is document.querySelector form and pass that in. Hey, like me now. Hey, cool. So I have a passing test now. So much tighter feedback loop than if I was trying to do all of this in Cypress. But now we run into an issue. So anytime you guys wrote browser JavaScript, like, could you do something like this? What's the problem with trying to run this in a browser? There's like a specific thing on this page that I cannot do in a browser. Module.exports. That's a Node thing. Browsers don't know shit about that. So what I have to do is browserify it. And now we're starting to get at the heart of like why test-driven development is so difficult when you're getting started with this. There's a million little pieces that are all fiddly as fuck. So, so what browserify does is takes Node code and makes it browserified. So the way that we browserify something is we install it. So I go npm install global browserify. And then to browserify some code, I might do something like browserify whatever the Node style thing that I'm doing is. And oh, I actually do it this way. Hang on. Yeah, so I need an entry point file. So I want to say scripts.message.js, and I want to output it to message.js. And so that message.js file doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to touch scripts message.js. And what I'm going to put in there is I'm going to require in that index. I'm going to destructure that attached form handler thing out of it, and then just call it like that. All right, let's try that again. All right, cool. And since you guys probably haven't seen browserify yet, what that looks like is I have this message.js file that does all this shit for me and will work in a browser. Yep. But like Webpack, I think is the single most confusing thing on the internet now. That's browserify. Yeah. All right, so one more thing I got to do. I need to like actually make that available inside of this file. Go script, source, and say message.js. And all right, let's see what happens. So first, see if my integration test still works. It does. When I do my Cypress test, hey girl, wait forever for it to load up. Imagine I did something wrong. Oh, I already know one thing I did wrong. If I go over here, remember I added that name to this input? Let's see if there's anything else that was barking at me. Cool. Same one as before. So I have finished my inner loop. Now my tiny loop. I'm seeing if this loop is going to work. Just because the world hates me, it didn't pass. Let's see why. All right, cool. So what I want to do now is I tend to do a little bit of just, because I changed a bunch of stuff and didn't refresh that. But while it's doing that, around this time, I'll start actually looking at the app that I made. We got a local host. All right, so I'm seeing something. Loading failed. Like, that's important. So, could not find message.js. So, there you go. So, what I have to do is go over here and do be able to serve static files. So I do express.static, and then do I have to invoke it? All right. Like that? Beautiful. All right. Cool. And before I run the test again, I just kind of want to look for any of these errors. All right, form is undefined. Oh, that would make sense, right? So, on that, this attach.form handler needed a form. And where I got that form from was by looking it up. Cool, oops. And now I need to, oh man, that's a lot of repetition. Why don't I put that in a script? So I could do something like, hey, there's a build script now, and what it does is browserifies scripts dot message, is that what I called it? Yep. Scripts.message.js into message.js. And now I should be able to npm run build. Cool, worked. And then npm start. Let's see if I'm getting any errors in my browser app now. Nothing. All right, let's see what the test says. Come on, Kyle. Come on, Kyle. Test pass. So that is an example of a test-driven development workflow. To recap, I decided what I wanted ahead of time. I wrote the test for how I knew I was going to be done. And then once I ran into a thing that was like a micro feature, a part of getting that done, I made a smaller, quicker test that tested that in isolation. And that's what TDD kind of looks like in real life. You could also do other loops off of this. So a good example of that is, like I mentioned earlier, doing data transformations. I have this object that looks like this, and I need to make it look like this. And that's something you might map, filter, reduce, kind of do that sort of shit over. That is a like no JS DOM needed regular ass Mocha test, like the ones you guys know how to write now. If I had to do one of those inside of these, I would write a unit test for that so that before I finish my integration test. You try to keep the feedback loop quick all the time. So you're always getting to a point of safety, little bit dangerous, back to safety, little bit dangerous, back to safety. Little high, little low. So what questions do you have?
Is there a way to loop over something as opposed to write a test for every single thing?
You can, however, check this out. One of the things that I really like about being extremely verbose, you don't want your tests to have logic in them. Like, if you can get away with it. You want to hard code everything, be as verbose as possible. Because the second you start doing shit like have loops and if statements and stuff, now what's going to test those? So it's the opposite of how you would write your real code, hard code everything.
It's like when you see that pattern, you find yourself looking at tests that are doing a bunch of stuff. That usually means you need to remodular, or something needs to be turned into a module so that you can call in and just get the code that's shared between the test and the app. You want to, pull that out and move it up to some other module. And
Yes.
test that module. So,
Indeed. But yeah, you want your test to be so stupid that like there's nothing in those that could break that you might just get lost on. That's not even your actual code. Other questions? How about takeaways? I want you to think for just a second. One takeaway that you had from this. Mr. Saunders.
Well, I find myself doing integration testing by going and clicking on the thing
Mhm.
and seeing if it shows up.
Yes.
And it's brutal because it sucks. So did I click on all the things? I don't know. Did I test it all? So this integration testing would be really, really handy for that. I think I'm ready to dive into it more. Like, it's way better than going and seeing if all the things do the thing.
Amen. So there's this saying in the testing community that you're doing test-driven development already, you're just not keeping your tests afterwards. But checking if a console log says the thing that you want it to, reloading the page and clicking a bunch of shit and seeing if it loads up correctly, that's test-driven development.
how many times have you entered a username and password into a login form and just kind of were like, these are two fields and I'm already over it?
Yeah.
That should be a little flag or a little bell in your head. You should automate this in an integration.
Cool. Supreme Brick Sam, what's a takeaway?
Takeaway. Sorry, what?
Got nothing out of it?
I think it's something out of it. I didn't really understand. I don't really understand, but I like how you use express without like generators. You just
Mhm.
I think that'd be pretty good.
I use Express Getter all the time. I would get used to doing both because Express Getter also gives you a lot of shit that you don't need, and might be a good thing for you guys to play around with after you graduate. Is like, could you recreate the stuff that the Express Getter does from scratch? What does the path module do? What's it even for? Half the shit in the Express Getter, if you delete it, what happens? You go, oh, now when I like do npm start, I don't get anything. I used to get all these cool messages about like what request came in and what the status code was. It's like, oh, fuck, that must be what Morgan was doing, the thing I just deleted. So experimenting with that kind of stuff will tell you a lot about what the generator is giving you and what it's not giving you. Mr. Herring, takeaway.
Test-driven development requires a lot more than, and it's in some ways very different than writing a test.
Yes. A thing that I always think about is like testing doesn't actually have all that much to do with writing tests. It has a lot more to do with knowing where you want to go. And that's a much more difficult thing to do. And it's why like, we need juniors who are really good at testing. I don't think that's really a thing. Because knowing what you want like almost implies a level of experience. So if you can like write a Mocha test with a describe and an it and an assertion in it, I think that's actually not that bad for where you guys are. especially if you can tack on the Cypress stuff that Dan and Cass were showing you yesterday, that puts you ahead of the curve as far as like most junior devs go, I think. Yeah.
They're nitpicking between the definitions of UAT application tests and your unit integration.
Totally.
They're asking for a QA engineer with 10 years experience, and that's
Yeah, this double loop testing thing is senior as fuck, honestly. Like knowing how to handle all these things and how to keep logic out of your tests, it's hard. And it takes practice, but that's what it looks like when you can do it. Cool. Lindsay, take away.
Spend time to save time.
Yes.
Upfront time to write a bunch of tests that make a pretty ugly website. But you know it works, so it's not like, I made this beautiful thing that does nothing.
Absolutely. 2 thoughts on that. The first is that now I have confidence that this works. So if, for example, I want to go to this thing and start refactoring it. For example, there's no good reason to do this, but if I wanted to try to inline this form data and do it like that instead, cool. Does that break my app? Well, now, no, it doesn't. But I don't have to guess, I don't have to click around. So any of these refactoring things I want to play around with, I know it works. All I have to do is keep it working. That's a very different mindset than like, I spent a lot of time on this and it's very fragile and I don't want it to break, and so I'm not going to try to make it look better or be more readable or fit in some future feature.
I'm used to just organizing my brain in like an Atom or VS Code setup where the files are on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Could you show us what that organization of the files that you're working with looks like?
Sure. So it's actually really bad. I wouldn't recommend doing it this way. Shit. But I got this. There's my node modules. I was putting the stuff that I was writing inside of this. So that's the thing that's going in that my browser BrowserFi is working on, and it's importing this. That test folder just has my little DOM integration test, and then my views look like that.
And where was the Cypress test
Sure.
compared to the local?
So Cypress folder looks like this, and it's in the integration test. In fact, cool story, you can actually remove everything in there except that one thing. Do Cypress fixtures, Cypress plugins, Cypress support, Cypress videos. Oops. Cool, so now all that's in Cypress is this. It'll still work though.
One other area where, so only testing one aspect of it shows a message from form. The things you want to think of when, the things that help me make better tests is when starting out something like this, I think one of the error cases, like those first. And I'll be like, okay, what happens when you click when there's no end? Make sure it shows error, type something in.
Or nothing, or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, like define the behavior called edge cases, or make it so input can't accept more than 100 characters, or some constraints that they need to check. Say, hey, if the input's over 100 characters, hey, this is too long. My data.
Super common TDD workflow is, it's called starting with the degenerate case. You go, it should show the message on the thing. Cool, what if there's no message? What does it do? It's always the easiest thing to code, and so you can go from red to green faster. But along the way, you might get some of the structure of what your eventual implementation looks like. True story. Cool, what else? Going once? Going twice? Sold, thank you much.
Ooh, just had my first rejection.
So
I'm surprised I did not pass.
it is a rite of passage.